We've looked at some of the administration settings for the data schema, the data import options, and from the perspective of the user, we need to start looking at how we would manage the campaign creation process. Really, the first step for the marketing team is to create audiences, create segments from their database. So this is where you'll see here in the left navigation pane my access here to effectively the queries and contact lists. So these two object types are available to build segments and audiences. The difference being that a query is a series of a set of rules, selection criteria, and a query is dynamic in nature, which means that continually updates according to selection criteria. So a query will return, for example, a different set of customers every day. Whereas a contact list would be a little bit more static in nature. It doesn't have that set of rules driving the selection of customers in the contact list. A customer record can potentially be a member of a contact list, and there's no duplication of data. So contact list essentially always references the customer record in the database table. Contact lists are typically used on one use case, which is in our integrated models. So if we looked at, say, HCL campaign integrated with Acoustic Campaign, for example, the segments defined in HCL campaign will be pushed across to Acoustic Campaign via API, and would have here a contact list object available and effectively ready for a campaign treatment. But I want to focus on the query builder today. So let's have a look at the query builder engine. Just let it fire up here. I'm going to build an example query, so if I just click on the queries and create a query. So I can basically give it a name here. And hit OK. Choose a database. So I'm going to choose browse the database. So I'll use the CRM database that I have here. Let's have a click through and then hit OK. So I'll then get effectively a menu, basically a series of drop-down menus, which really is designed for the marketing team in mind. So the non-technical user, so it doesn't require any scripting or anything like that. The principle works simply picking data sources from data fields. So we can actually go through and pick these fields and use potentially logical operators presented to me in natural language. So I would say these are self-explanatory to find some of the selection criteria. So what I'm going to do now is a selection based on geography. So if I look at basically the profile, and I could look at the data fields. So if I select from the data field here, I can look down and scroll through. I can drop down here and I could look at, say, I could look at country. In this case, I'm going to look at city. So I'm going to pop in the city there. So it contains the following. So equal to, or contains. So all of those that you would usually expect. So I'm going to put contains, and I'm going to put in a value of, let's say, Manchester. Let's have a look at Manchester. So I could pop that in, and so basically look at a selection of people from Manchester, and of course with the possibility to layer over these conditions. So I can hit done here. So it contains Manchester, and then I can add another on that. So let's look at a date field for now, shall we? Let's have a look at date. So if I look at date, I can then look at the criteria here, and let's have a look. I could say I could pick an anniversary. I could pick an anniversary. So anniversary is, so I click on the anniversary, and then give it a value. So in this case, I'm going to put in a value of let's say 3 days. So let's say 3 days. So I can click on that and click done. And let's take a look at some of the other values here. I can just hit save. On that, I can look at you can see it's saved that query successfully. I could look at let's say other parts to here. I could look at the purchase data if I wanted to. So I could look at data fields here, and I could also look at purchase data. So if I scroll through here, I could go all the way through, all the way down, and I can look at the fields here and access the relational tables here. So I could click through here and then choose a relational table. So in this case, I'm going to look at purchase data and click on so. So I could then select a field. So let's look at purchase date. And I could then look at, for potentially building this next campaign, I could look at say next 2 weeks. So if I did that, I could then go, so within the next, and then give it a value. So I could do 14 days and hit done. So it's important also, you can see here that I have capabilities to look at functions. So for example, I could look at sum, I could look at average, minimum, and maximum difference here. So I could add those if I wished to that criteria. So I could select that to operate from there, from the criteria on that case. So essentially that enables a use case for segmentation. So I could actually I can basically look at someone, say, selecting people who have made 10 purchases in the last 6 months, where there's an average value of each purchase may be, say, greater than 200. So that's the sort of collection that allows to make. So it's pretty sophisticated, and it allows me to create some very, very bespoke selections.